Why do you Brits, I'm not British, call an elevator a lift when it goes both up and down? I responded that Americans didn't call an elevator a descendivator when it moves down. At Customs in Los Angeles International Airport, Customs agent. Where are you from? Me. Denmark. Customs agent. Sir, please don't lie about your nationality. Me. Excuse me. Customs agent. Denmark isn't a real country. Now please tell me your country of origin. Me. Sir, you are literally holding my passport, which is from Denmark, in your hand. How can you sit there and tell me that my country doesn't exist? Customs agent. Sir, Denmark is a region of Sweden and not a recognized independent nation. The Swedes would be fond of this encounter. I once had an American tell me I need to try the real Gouda cheese they have in the US because everything else was fake Gouda. I'm Dutch and actually live near Gouda. I'm British, was traveling in the States, got talking to a guy at a bar while we're waiting for service, and he recommended I try a pint of Guinness while in the US. He informed me they don't sell Guinness in the UK. I politely explained that they do indeed have Guinness in just about every pub in the UK. He disagreed, adding that he's never been himself, but his son-in-law went to London on business and told him so. I explained I'd lived in the UK, including London, my whole life. He looked at me lost in thought for a few moments and said, "They don't have Guinness there," and walked away. I swear on my mother's life that this happened. I was on a student exchange between my German school and a school in San Francisco in the late 90s. When the Americans came to visit us, we had a welcome party for them at a friend's place. That friend had a dog, and at some point he gave the dog a command in German. The dog obeyed, and one of the American kids asked how we managed to teach German to the dog. He wasn't joking either. He seemed convinced that all pets are somehow born with knowledge of the English language, but all other languages need to be taught to them. When an American asked me what it's like to have an accent, they thought that they had no accent and their voice was default, basically. I don't need affordable healthcare. I need freedom. This is an actual quote. Anyway, the full cost of my kid's birth, including all scans, midwife, obstetrics appointment, labor, inoculations, heel stick and follow-up antenatal, was $180. I live in the Southern Hemisphere. Talking to an American online in December, and I mentioned it was summer for me. She kept asking which month I was in, kept insisting it must be June, and couldn't seem to wrap her head around the idea that it was simultaneously December and summer in the Southern Hemisphere. Wait, y'all have IKEA? I'm Swedish. An Austrian friend and I were told about this magical thing they have in America called fireworks, and how we should go see it at least once in our lives. Canadian here. I was 7 and in Florida telling my new, also 7-year-old friend about our money system. I told her we don't have $1 or $2 bills, they are coins and called a loonie and a toonie. She goes and asks her parents, and they told her I was lying. Y'all are part of the USA, you just have a different flags all. No, I assure you, Canada, us not part of the US. I was asked if France is part of the United Kingdom. When I tried explaining him what the United Kingdom is, he told me England is no longer part of the UK because of Brexit. Speak English, this is America. It was online, but yeah, the sheer stupidity struck me hard. Met a cool group in Belgrade. They were very surprised they could have beer at 21. That was so sincere, I kind of felt sorry for them in a good way. Decided to be a good host and show them the real good time. Took them parties, river clubs, cave clubs, found them drugs, they asked. All in all, we had a pretty epic week. The kind of young people of 21 can make for themselves in Capital City. Somehow the conversation went to God. I mentioned I don't really believe in that. And they were so fecking pissed. Literally instant change. Whole group started explaining me Jesus stuff. Angrily, they were disappointed and angry they spent a week with me. I was so feckin' surprised. I mean, we drinked, drugged, and did a lot of sit Bible I presume doesn't approve. Couldn't held a conversation that evening, couldn't change subject, they kept pushing, aggressively. Went to the bathroom, went home. How can Canadians offer free health care? Why would any doctors want to work for free? This is slavery. Had a black American assume that I was African American also, because I'm black. I had to explain to him that the ethnically specified title, African American, is only used to describe black people from America, not black people from other countries, and that black people from other countries are not specifically labeled by heritage, race, or ethnicity. Afterward, I revealed to him that I am actually Bahamian. Despite all that explaining, he still proceeded to ask, "Oh, so you're an African Bahamian then?" I felt the vein on the side of my head twinge a little. How long did you take you learn to use metric instead of normal measurements? He genuinely didn't understand that metric was a system we actually used every day. We weren't constantly having to mentally convert mots remonts to feet or pounds to understand how big they really were. I didn't know it was this cold in Cuba. We are in Spain, Europe. Stupid fecker came to university here on a scholarship for 6 months and didn't even know which country was coming into, nor thought it was strange how long the flight was. He also didn't think about Googling the place to see where it was. The weather, dunno, information about the place he was going to live for 6 months. Only packed flip-flops, shirts, and shorts. We're in the north of Spain. We have UK weather. He had to spend quite a bit for winter clothes in October because he had nothing to wear. He was also bummed because he couldn't find tacos here. You can. As a Brit, I had to bite my tongue when asked, "Do you celebrate Independence Day?" I love the African American culture here, said in Cape Town, South Africa. I live in New Zealand and worked in retail, so there's been a few. Funniest was, "You have to serve me." After they made a racial remark, wasn't too bad, but still feckin' rude, threw a tantrum in the store because they didn't look at the prices before they used one of our products, then started trashing the place. When my manager told them no, I certainly did not have to serve them, by law, and she was calling the cops for destruction of property, the lady made an O face then took off without paying. Cops got her like an hour later. I just wish I was still at work when they brought her in to pay for all the stuff she broke, stole, used. I'd say it's a toss-up between, is England and London? Do you still drive horses to get around in Europe? And a guy trying to smack talk on Xbox who, after I told him nobody cares, said, "Who cares what you think? You're foreign." I said, "So are you." And he laughed and said, "No retarded, I'm American." I met an American tourist who was adamant that my country, Iceland, was a home-ruled territory under the US government. He said this during our nation's Independence Day. He assumed we shared a similar status with Puerto Rico. He was convinced of the error of his ways after confronting 2 other natives in a Google search. Are your parents Democrats or Republicans? Hey, have different political parties here, love. The typical stuff. Do you have cars, trees, dogs in Germany? Another favorite. Is Hitler still alive? A middle-aged American was surprised to find out Venice was so old and an actual city for centuries, and not built in the 20th century for tourist purposes. Englishman, living in the US for 15 years now. I've been asked a lot of bizarre things, but one of the best was someone who asked what language we speak in England and how long it took me to learn English when I moved here. Poking fun at me with France stereotypes. I'm not from France, my parents are not from France, and I've never been to France. My first language is French. That's enough for Americans to treat me like I'm from France. Ah, you're from Denmark. Where in Canada is that again? I can't believe you would live in a country where you're living under the dictatorship of the Queen. I am Canadian. You speak real good English for a foreigner. I'm British and she knew that. Edit, because a lot of people seem to think that no American could ever say this and mean it. It was a lovely, sweet, older woman who thought she was paying me a genuine compliment. We sat and chatted in her garden for about an hour as she plied me with her homemade lemonade and asked me about my life and what brought me to Washington State. I thanked her because she was saying something lovely, albeit weird, and we continued chatting. Had a taxi driver in New York ask how we got there, from Ireland. When we said by plane, he was like, "You have airports?" Also thought we were still getting around on horses. I'm Australian, and in 2015, I was doing a cruise around New Zealand with my family. Might add that I have an autistic daughter who was 14 at the time, and despite being autistic is incredibly sociable, but has a tendency to strike up unusual conversations with strangers. We needed to get to one of the restaurants a few floors above us and decided to use the lift instead of the stairs. The lift arrived on our floor and we entered with an elderly couple already inside. My wife and I greeted them and they duly greeted us back, and we soon ascertained they were American. Seconds later, my autistic daughter stated the obvious, that we were all traveling in a lift. A random throwaway comment, but that's just who she is. The female literally barked at my daughter and told her the correct word was in fact an elevator. At this point, I interjected and politely mentioned that where we are from, it's called a lift. But this couple were adamant that it was an elevator. Their attitude was we were wrong and they were right. Fortunately, we never did get to see them the remainder of the cruise. We share a common language being English, and there are going to be differences how we say things, depending where we've been brought up. It's about being open-minded and accepting. Unfortunately, it appeared that the world revolved around this couple. Wow, you speak American very well for a foreigner. Thanks, lady, I'm Canadian, and American is the only language I know. I once spoke to an American that was surprised that Black Australian individuals had an Australian accent. It's so weird, but you can also see it coming somehow in how they often think about race. The same thing that one was surprised that Black Dutch individuals, of course, had Dutch names. A friend was dating an American, and a bunch of us went out for a pub meal, UK. Now there's a stereotype that Americans can be a little loud. And, unfortunately, this was the case with this girl. Literally everyone in the pub was giving her side-eye. But Noon says anything because that would be rude. My friend very subtly tries to make her aware of the noise level, and she yells, "Oh no, honey, I'm not loud. All y'all are just too quiet. Such a quaint little country. Y'all need to use your outdoor voices." We were quite clearly inside. Peter, do you have color television in Germany? I lived for a while in an old house in Somerset. It was once owned by Reverend Thomas Budd, who traveled to America on the Mayflower. Had quite a few Americans turn up on the doorstep. There's a blue plaque, expecting me to drop everything and provide a house tour and have expert knowledge of Thomas Budd. My wife was staying at a hostel in Athens a few years ago. She shared a room with an American in her 20s. They got talking about where they've stayed in the past, and my wife told her that she used to live in Sweden for a few years. The American didn't know where or what Sweden was. My wife said, "It's a country next to Norway." "Oh, Norway," the American burst out. "Ole is from there. Do you know Ole?" Canadian here, worked for AT&T. Where I worked in Windsor, I could see America. The number of questions about snow and igloos whenever anyone found out was too high. I swear I spent 15 minutes trying to convince a woman from Detroit that the crisscrossing lights in the sky came from Caesars Windsor and that there is no snow here right now. It's July.